All right, here we are, Be a Refuge, and we are chatting today. Just me and Kathy. Blind
It's
still.
fun sometimes. We love having our friends on, and then sometimes we're like, okay, let's just have a good conversation about some things about the refuge together.
Yeah. So today we're going to be chatting a little bit about Refuge Birthday and Holy Week and just kind of adaptability and what does that look like in a community. So
Yeah, when this episode goes out, the refuge will be 17 years old. 17.
17.
And that is wild. Our quote unquote official birthday is April 1st, which you wrote a really funny song about that. I can't remember what it was,
Oh
but
my
we did
gosh,
it on Easter.
I did. Was it the Cheers one? I've read many silly
It
songs.
was something about Jesus isn't dead.
Oh yeah, because that's right. That was a spontaneous song. It was we one Easter we wrote we just like wrote a song as a community. So I had people shout out different words. And then so the verses were kind of the things that people thought of. And then the chorus was um April Fools, Jesus said, I'm not dead, I'm not dead. Because it was
Oh
April
my God.
1st was Easter.
There were multiple people that said it was their most favorite Easter at the refuge.
Oh gosh, I'll see if I can remember that. It was I didn't record it, so it's probably gone, but I do remember it was like Adam Sandler-esque. April
Oh,
Fools.
and it was really fun, and it kind of points to this conversation, honestly, because also April 1st is the refuge's birthday. And then I think this will probably be right in the middle of Holy Week because Be a Refuge is released on Wednesdays. And so the refuge has Holy Week, from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. Refuge style is what we always say, because it's totally different than a lot of people who came from certain kinds of experiences, liturgical experiences in their churches, whatever they looked like. I mean, all kinds, from Catholic, Lutheran, Methodist, all of them. And that we do have a refuge style to these things. And it's this weird mashup because actually, at least me, you kind of had more of that. You had Lutheran roots, right? So you were
Yeah,
used
mostly.
to Lent and the
Yeah,
Holy.
yeah. Yeah, starting in like junior high. My before that we were kind of bebopping around. But yeah, I went to a Lutheran grade school and then we joined the church because we got money off tuition.
Smart, good
Yeah.
move.
But yeah, my parents that's still their home church. And yeah, so that was but then I think in high school I was more into just general evangelical, or and then I'm charismatic, and I've been all over the place, but some of me has returned to kind of the liturgical roots and following church calendar kind of things. So
Yeah, and I remember, I think this is a little right before your time at the refuge because we were at the Grange. And I can't remember the exact year that you came into the refuge. You've told me this, but I can't remember what it is in this exact moment. I'm just picturing our space and the transition.
I don't remember either.
Ah!
It was like a year before you left the Grange, I think. And that was just like a few times. And then I think I was more present like once you're in the new space.
Okay. So I think that was, so 2012 would be like a year before we moved to
Yeah.
our current facility. And so we were in the Grange though for 5 years. So I think this was for sure before your time because it was, maybe not exactly when we were in the Grange, but fairly early on. And that is the refuge. Always had a weekly gathering and we explored so many things. We're going to have another conversation really about Sundays. Well, it was Saturdays, but kind of the weekend, spiritual formation place in the refuge. That will be another episode because it's so fun to process the evolution and why we do what we do now and what we used to do. But at the Grange, we decided, most of us, not all of us, but a lot of us came from evangelicalism, like you just said. And really, there wasn't anything except for put all your juice into the road to Easter.
Yeah.
And get as many people there as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And the very first Easter at the Refuge, which was in, oh my gosh, it was in 2006 in our timing.
Wow.
Is that possible? I think it is, because we were at Foothills. So
Okay.
we were at Foothills Church in Arvada, and we had this little room. It was like a red theater room. It was somehow, Easter falls in different times.
Sure.
And so we had a gathering for Easter. It's all coming back to me now. That's what's fun about these conversations. And our friend Paul Romig-Levitt brought all this creative stuff from the very beginning. He was part of our planting team, and he's a drama person, and they created this tableau of this conversation of Jesus walking into a bar and hanging out with the disciples, the story that kind of comes next. And so it was this, like, no one had this intimate, it was like this being in like a little bar, and they're doing this drama thing that's super powerful, but super simple, and it's raw. And that was our first Wild Easter. So like completely different, than where we came, where there were like 6 services and you were supposed to invite all your friends, and
the orchestra and
yeah, cards came in the mail. And how many freaking cards I get in my mailbox here in Arvada. But I say
Have
that.
you ever been? Oh, wait, this is more live nativity, but sometimes they do it for Palm Sunday where they have like an animal, like a donkey or
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
actual animals and stuff.
And my kids went to Christian school, for a chunk of time, and that was this huge thing. It's so funny that you're bringing this up, because they did this huge Easter thing. And actually, the last scene is the senior pastor with the person that's portraying Jesus ascending to heaven, waving. I am not freaking kidding you. So, and that's actually in the Refuge. They were still there at the beginning of the Refuge. But Paul, then it was a few years later that we decided. So we even though we didn't have we didn't follow the church calendar, we were trying to explore different ways to engage with Holy Week. So that was one example. But it took us several years. I would say we did kind of, in some ways, bring some of what we came from. It's just not really that rhythm. Like, we weren't plugged in to the bigger Christian calendar. And I remember at the Grange, and I think Paul was still there, that we decided to use the church calendar for a whole year. So it framed our whole year, and we did it creatively. But what I love about it, and our friend Jenny Herrick was there too, and this was her jam. Like, she loved this season. And so she really brought this thing to us of the value of following these seasons in the liturgical calendar that people around the world use, where you read the same passages, or you have a choice of these passages. And then you also have these special days that are part of it, and the season of Lent. And those were our first times that we did some of those things. And I remember an Ash Wednesday service that we did that was, I think it was called Thirst or Thirsty. And it had all these things about water and desert and, all these things. But what is cool about that, I will say, is that that's when, even though we didn't always follow the church calendar after that, we did build some of those more clear practices into the Refuge. And we did Lent, Ash Wednesday, we did Fat Tuesday, we did donuts and pancakes a couple different times on Tuesday night, people's houses. That was super fun. And then we started Ash Wednesday. And then some contemplative stuff related to the 40 days. And then in the rhythm, we would do this big Palm Sunday dinner. And then on Wednesday, our friend Dawn Hyken, who we heard from last time, she brought the Seder dinner to the refuge. And the first Seder dinner was actually in our house. And it moved there, and it must have been 2013 because it was we somehow got displaced or something, and I can't remember everything, but it was maybe even a couple of years before that. Now that I say that, it doesn't really matter. It just was supposed to be at the refuge at the Grange, and then it ended up at our house. And her husband, who had died many years before, was Jewish. And so they had always done family seders. And so she brought this to us, and most people had never done one. And she offered that gift. And then here we are, actually on this day that this podcast will be released, we're going to be gathering at the refuge doing a family Seder dinner, but total refuge style. It has this weird mashup between contemporary culture, Christian culture, and Jewish tradition all mixed together. And so the part I think, as we're like processing just a little bit, talking about, is it's just fun to see the evolution and the things that we tried along the way. And I don't know if you remember, do you remember any of those things in that season? I mean, that was a really big swing from the Grange to our new facility. And I can't remember what carried over exactly and what didn't.
I think the thing I remember most is just Easter, just because I was helping coordinate music and stuff. And so that shifting over the years. Yeah, just it looking really different, having a sermon-y thing sometimes, but usually just stories. And then with music, one year something coalesced and we had a whole band, like a trumpet and a keyboard. And I don't know if you remember that. It was Amy Jo and Ramon, and it was a full thing.
I forgot about that. That was yes, I can picture it. Yes.
So it's just this magical, usually it's just me and Sage, playing guitar. But so yeah, I think just the flexibility over the years, the adaptability sticks out to me. And measuring these days and these rituals and these things that are celebrated around the world, but also in our own way, and a way that's that is refuge style. So
yeah. And the dilemma, I mean, it's the dilemma that we feel, and I felt it then, and I still feel it now. I think it's settled in, is that we do hold a lot of different faith perspectives in our community related to Christianity. And so there's a lot of woundedness, and then there's a lot of desire to be grounded in some of the things in a healthy way, not in that wild, 6 services, it's all about Easter, and it's not about the reality of that Holy Week that had a lot of really hard and beautiful but complicated things that happened, and Maundy Thursday, with foot washing and this example of humility, and then Good Friday and death, honoring death, that it is a real thing, and Holy Saturday of just being stuck in grief, not knowing, and then Sunday. And that pattern of those 3, I think we did a series actually at the Miramonte when we were at the Wedding Event Center, where we did Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and really separately, and honoring. I remember people grieving, and this experiential things that we did related just holding space for Saturday, because we just skip over all the hard parts, but everyone kind of lives in those hard parts. But I do think that the dilemma has just always been making space for everybody, because it's also super triggering for people. They don't want to do it, but then there's a group that does. And I'm actually pretty proud of us that we haven't let go of it, because even if some people who used to participate in those gatherings don't anymore because of their faith deconstruction, or it's just not like the space that fills their soul, there are others that do and really do long for it. And that I'm glad that we have that anchored in still. And it's a complex season for me, but I love the story, and I love it's a complicated story, but I love what happened on Palm Sunday and just this like high that everybody had, because I think it really fits. And then the story just devolves. And then there's this holding space for this hard and confusing, horrible thing, and then grief, and then the hope of new life emerging out of the hardest thing. And none of it is simple. And so that part I can really connect to in the downward ways of Jesus. And so I think that it's fun, but, wouldn't you say, kind of as a nurturer of it all, that's got some complications, just like holding the tension of it all?
For sure. For sure. And we'll talk about this in a different episode, but, I think that's kind of always been a struggle with spiritual formation Sundays, especially. But, in this space of the refuge, where we're trying to be a landing place for folks, and all different, like you're saying, all different spaces of faith. It's always a tension of like, what do we create that opens people up? I mean, that's I might have said this in a different episode, but when I started doing music at the refuge, that was my prayer, is like, God, help me create music that opens people up rather than shutting them down, which is really hard.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel you. I'm not a musician.
Yeah, and just that, because so many people have, not everybody, but a lot of people have church baggage. There's a lot of Christian songs that are terrible theology, in my opinion, and lyrics, and then there's just baggage around worship and emotionalism and, that kind of stuff. And so, what does it look like to create spaces that open people? So beyond music, but like create contemplative spaces, worshipful spaces, like spiritual spaces that where people can engage, and then also own it if they're triggered and leave, but like also that open, and I think that's always the dance that we're doing. Yeah. And figuring out who we are, which has changed over time, which might be disorienting for people in some ways.
Yeah, and that's the part, I think, this evolution, like truly evolving based on who's there and factors in the world. We're not in a little bubble. That's part of the beauty, I think, of our community, is it's super engaged, and most people really care about a lot of things in the world related to social justice and action and change in the world, whether that has a Christian like catalyzing part or not. Like, it's a big deal to people, equity and inclusion and those kinds of things. But it's like the ability to go, we've got a whole, we have it all in our community. Like, there's not one group that like dominates everything. It's dispersed. So, but it also means that you don't have some of the energy and juice that a typical church would have. And this is something super significant, is that, Easter and Christmas Eve are usually like the two biggest days for pretty much most any church. And they are not at the refuge. I mean, people come, but it's not like that. Our biggest days are trunk or treat, late day, and post-Christmas bingo, the week after Christmas Eve service. And everybody comes to those. Like, they're really big gatherings. And there's other ones too that have more people, but that is a really interesting thing that we can't control, as leaders, conveners of space, nurturers of the community. We have to honor it, and then not be trying to change it and think. I think this is maybe as we're on our 17th birthday, one of the thoughts is letting go of thinking it's supposed to be a certain way.
Yeah.
And leaning into celebrating what is.
Yeah.
And honoring it and like treasuring it and seeing it and naming it as beautiful instead of something less than, because it looks so different against everybody else's.
Yeah, it reminds me of our Christmas Eve gathering this year.
Yes.
And it was really beautiful. And it's like, since I've been at the refuge, like our normal Sundays, we usually gather around couches or, in the cafe or, but this one, like Christmas Eve and Easter, we always like line up chairs just because of space and numbers and stuff. But after this one, I was talking to Kathy and I was just like, man, why do we do that? We don't do that for anything else, literally, unless it's like we have a guest coming in who's presenting and we need to have a ton of people. But for anything that is coming out of who we are, lining up chairs facing one person or facing forward, we don't do that for anything. So like, what if we don't do that again? For now, maybe there'll be a time when we're that feels right again. But I was like, everything was so sweet and beautiful for Christmas Eve. But that was like the one thing where I was like, why are we doing that? And I know practicality, you can fit more people and that kind of thing, but that doesn't, we fit people no matter what when we don't do that,
Yes.
And so yeah, just being willing to be like, oh yeah, like reassess, like, and that's one of my big passions in anything, but just in community is like reassess, like hold loosely, reassess. And like, this might've been serving us in a season and maybe in this next season, it's different. And it doesn't mean like the old way was bad. It just means it's no longer serving us. And so what is serving our community in this season?
Honestly, like as you say that, and I remember when you messaged me this, like it makes me want to cry in a good way because it's so liberating. And what I think that's a gift that you bring to the refuge community, Joe, I really do, is that ability to ask that question with ease. Like, it's like, yeah, let's listen. Let's listen to that feeling that we had, that it was so sweet and we loved it, but it didn't feel quite us. And every Christmas Eve, we kind of like go, this is the one time we're in, seats across, and just being able to go, hey, just because we've done that for 17 Christmas Eves, we don't have to do that anymore. And we're still going to create a sweet and healing and special Christmas Eve gathering for whoever's there, but to like settle into who we are at this season. Because I do think there were times that probably fit better. But I think there's been quite a few years, to be honest, where it didn't. And COVID was a hiccup, in a weird way that lasted, not a small hiccup, but what is it? Disruption, it's like this disruption to the system, because we ended up having to do 2 years of Christmas Eve online. And that was a different story. And then I think this one was our time back. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so instead of just going, oh, we're back and let's just do it this way, Joe, like, asked that good question and it just felt so right. And we won't even really change that much, but we'll gather in a different way. We'll gather and we'll be connected in a little different way. And I think that it helps me exhale, and then it makes me like literally filled with gratitude that we can do that.
Yeah.
And we're not afraid to do that. And I think for me on COVID, kind of like in this story now, because now we have, all this long history of these different movements of our different locations, 4 solid locations that we met in before our current one. So this is our 5th, is that we are adaptable. And when COVID hit for me, it was a terrible time in my story. Just 4 months after Jared died. 4.5 months after Jared died. And, you know, that's another conversation, but just like really what the Refuge community like did to help Jose and I, and my family doesn't live here, the kids don't live here, but like to feel supported and to feel like we could just be part still, like not long. Like we weren't gone for that long before we longed to just come back and be with everybody. I didn't have to do stuff, but to be there. But then Practicing came out. That was a book that got released like 2 weeks before COVID. My kid had just died, and then it was COVID. But I remember this so clearly about us. It's like the Refuge was meant for something like that because we adapted and we truly like it rocked us because it was a global thing and there was a lot of trauma and it was really hard for people not to be together in person. But we found ways to, oh my gosh, we did so many creative things and we adjusted all of our gatherings and we didn't try and make them what they were. Like where people would just watch them online. Like we've really tried to create community and creative ways to be together. And that honestly is one of the things that I am most proud of and grateful for, because the community was about what happened together and not what's something that's pulled together that you go to.
Yeah, I just had a flashback of like for Sundays, like I would ask people to bring a mug and everyone would like hold up their mugs.
Yeah.
Here for that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We brought different
like, those little parts of connecting, you know.
Yeah,
And
it was beautiful.
yeah, rather than like a production or something, but community still through the screens and connecting. And I think that's kind of, yeah, I mean, it's one of the challenges of not having things highly programmed is that sometimes it's disorienting for folks. But I think that, you know, the adaptability and the ability to connect to each other when things change is a huge gift.
Yeah, it really, that part I was just so amazed at, honestly, you know, just so many ways that everyone just said we need to be together. It just needs to look different. And then how do we care for each other in this trauma that we're all experiencing, you know, and the longing to be connected, the fear, the disconnection, you know, all the things, but like how, you know, how can we do it? And that we didn't feel pressure as cultivators to like make something, like we kind of all did it, like people like created their own things. And so just like celebrating that. And then I just want to say out loud, like it is no small freaking thing that we exist 17 years later. And that is because of being, I think, centered on community, like cultivating community and not building a church. You know, like really on like that grassroots community is why we're here, is this healing community. And some people are in on Jesus still. Most everybody has the desire somewhere in there, like the values of Jesus. And then, you know, people who are in all different places and just want to be with people. Like it's this wide range. But like we are dedicated to that human thing of just somehow, some way finding a way to be together and always be open so that new people can come.
Yeah.
And I love that part. So people enter in the system and we'll have new people at the Seder dinner tonight, you know, and that will be so fun. And then there'll be Dawn and me and some people who have been there since the very first one. And that like that program is adapted and changed, but like the anchoring thing that's there is that a gift is being offered from the community. Kids and grown-ups can come. You don't have to come. And we are somehow anchored in this bigger story, Refuge style. Like it has all these factors, I guess, that are different than a lot of other people's factors.
I love it. Oh, any last nuggets before we wrap with our closing question?
Just happy birthday, Refuge.
Happy birthday, Refuge.
Yeah.
17.
17.
Almost an adult.
It's a little scary. We've been driving for a year. We haven't driven off the road yet.
Not yet. Or maybe we have, but we've gotten back on and nobody.
Two fender benders for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, friends, so we're leaving today with a little bit more or a little bit less. That's kind of our closing tradition.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm just leaving with a little more resolve.
Mm.
Kind of like, yeah, just like resolve in a positive, like just this is us. Maybe owning that this is us. It's wild and wacky, and then it also makes sense.
Yeah. I think I'm leaving with just remembering, I get, kind of this reminder of like who we are and that it's all fine. It's all fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.